Welcome to another episode of Your Worst Song. I'm Alex Southey. This was a really fun one. I finally got to speak to Aaron Goldstein. I say finally because it's my fault, but it was a bit of a run around trying to find scheduling time for me to get Aaron on because I've been moving and life stuff and that kind of thing. But this is chock full of great stories. We talk a lot about Willie Nelson and his son. Talk a bit about Neil Young. Talk about Kathleen Edwards. Talk about City and Color. Talk about Espanola, Aaron's main band, and how that factors into his gigging as a pedal steel guitarist and that kind of thing. So all incredibly interesting as far as I'm concerned. Make sure you go listen to his music. Make sure you listen to the other episodes of this podcast and recommend it to friends. Thanks very much. This is Your Worst Song. Um,
Mhm.
well, Aaron, thank you so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate it. Uh,
Of course, my pleasure, Alex.
I am doing these mostly video now, and I want to start off a little bit. You have a G on your hat. Is that because of
Uh,
your last name?
it's exactly the reason. Um, a couple years ago, well, no, two years running, I've done these cruises with Kathleen Edwards, where it's this company in the States called Sixth Man, and they produce like over 20 music themed cruises per year. It's not the same. I mean, I have a lot of friends who have gone and played on cruise ships as like a thing to do for a few months or years or whatever. And that's great, but that's not what this is. This is like a music festival on a cruise ship, where there's like a permanent or semi-permanent stage on the pool deck, and then multiple stages around the boat. And after playing like so many summer festivals and losing quite a bit of my hair, I knew that I needed to have a hat on when I was outside, or else I was going to fry. And I mean, I love the Jays. I wear Jays hats all the time, but I started to see pictures of myself at these festivals, being like, do I want to be like a Blue Jays guy
I
on
know
a
exactly what you mean.
gig? So I walked into a Lids and I was like, what am I going to get that I can wear? I figured I'd get like a blank hat, but they have this whole apparatus where they can embroider anything for you. So I was like, you know what? Put a G on this for me.
That's awesome, like
And
a superhero G, sort of.
yeah, why not? I'm thinking of getting another one just to have some variety of color. Um,
You should get hats that just spell out your name eventually,
yeah.
Gold. Tell me more about that cruise. That's so interesting. So where does
Uh,
it go?
well, yeah. I mean, they both left from Miami, and then they both had like sort of Caribbean era or Caribbean type stops. The one of them is called Cayamo, which is it's kind of like the Americana cruise. It's Yeah, they've been going for, I think there's over 15 years, I'm pretty sure. And then the one we did the following year was called the Outlaw Country Cruise, which is kind of like it's the same brand as like uh Willie Nelson's Outlaw Radio and the Outlaw Festival that tours in the summer. It's
Right,
like,
I've heard of that. That's very cool.
yeah, the fellow who founded it and was sort of like the head of it just passed away unexpectedly, like this past year. But it was sort of his thing, and yeah. So I mean, it's a festival on the water, and so the clientele is like a certain type of, it's the type of person that can afford that kind of thing, that can go for a week on a cruise. Like it's not, I don't know much about cruises, but you pay for the cruise and then you're also paying like for a festival ticket. It's all one price, but I'm sure that it's more expensive than going on a typical cruise.
Yes,
So
good point.
yeah, it tends to be like not all retirees, but you have a lot of retirees, and then you have like some middle-aged people who like are gainfully employed, and they tend to come on these things. But I have to say they're fun as hell.
I'm
When I was
sure
going to
they're
the
fun as
first one,
hell.
when I was going into the first one, I was like, what am I doing? going on this cruise. But I love playing with Kathleen, and like anytime she calls, I'm showing up. So I was just like, whatever, we'll see how it goes, and ended up having just a great time. I've known some other people who have done either the same cruise in different years or similar cruises. Everybody ends up having an absolute blast. I know the Jeremy Albino guy, like Jeremy and his band have done it at least once, and I spoke to a couple of those guys, and they were like, "Yeah, it's obviously so much fun." There's a casino on the boat, and you know, uh, at the end of the night, that's kind of where everybody ends up, who's still up and still hanging, and yeah, there's like, a 24-hour buffet, like just a kind of insane, like very like American way to vacation, there's
Yes, yes.
always food at all hours.
Well, I was just
Um,
going to ask related to that, like, is it a sort of all-inclusive vibe as well for the musicians where, hey, if you want drinks at any time, if you want food at
yeah.
any time, yeah,
So the food is all inclusive, and the first year we did it was still sort of COVID adjacent, like it was uh must have been 2022, I guess.
sure, yeah,
That makes sense. And so they have a booze package that you can buy that is, if you're going to really hit the booze hard, I guess it's a good savings to buy this package, but I forget how much it was. Anyway, they offered to the artists this amazing deal that year
hmm.
where it was like 20 US dollars per day for the booze package. And
Damn.
uh, so we all took it. The next year they didn't have that, and we just whatever, we didn't get the package. And I mean, I'm not really a huge drinker, to be honest. Like I'm not sober, but I don't have the gene where I like need to drink a lot.
Sure.
Uh, and so I was fine without the package, to be honest.
Okay, okay.
I was fine to just like do what I needed to do, and get a drink here and there. Um,
And so you were brought in via working with Kathleen Edwards. Is that
yeah.
how, what's the best way to ask it? How did she even hear about that? Do you know?
Well, she has an American agent, and she's sort of a known
For
uh,
sure.
in Americana, and she had made this comeback record after 8 years of not working, or I mean, of working. She had this coffee shop that she worked her ass off at, but she hadn't done music, and so that record is called Total Freedom, and it came out unfortunately April of 2020. So it was just like this
Unfortunate
off.
timing, but I fucking
Yeah,
love that record. I remember
yeah,
that
yeah.
coming out and really liking it.
The record's incredible, and like she really, I felt so. You got to know about Kathleen, and like I'm lucky to be a collaborator and a friend of hers, which makes me happy. But when I first started playing pedal steel 15 years ago, um, I remember saying to my girlfriend at the time, I was like, if I get really good at this instrument, I could end up playing with somebody like Kathleen Edwards. Uh, and so I was a fan before I ever was even in her orbit. So I still like, she's my friend and I love working with her, but there's still some moments where I'm just like, I can't believe I'm playing this song right now. I love this song. Um, and so she, that record came out, Total Freedom, and I thought she finally like nailed some really top tier press that she deserved. I mean, she'd always got great press, I think, but like the New York Times wrote this beautiful thing about it, and it was a very, very deserving thing. Um, so I think on the strength of that, she ended up with her U.S. agent, who has been. I mean, I'm not privy to the inner workings, but it feels like it's been a good relationship, and she's done a lot of work. And so, yeah, I don't know exactly how she ended up on these cruises, but it was somewhere in there, somewhere in the team
Sure.
figured it out. And
Oh,
now they're aware of her. And after we did the Outlaw cruise, they put us on the Willie Nelson Outlaw tour last summer, which was incredible.
well, tell
Uh,
me about that. That leads us right into another question I wanted to ask. Like,
yeah, for
that
sure.
sounds
Uh,
awesome.
yeah, so we did like I don't know if it was like 2 weeks or 3 weeks or something on this package tour that goes every summer. It's the Outlaw Tour, and Willie is, as far as I understand, Willie's always the headliner,
Hmm.
and they put about 4 or 5 other acts on the bill for the day, and it starts early. and it's it does amphitheaters like the size of Bud Stage, but when you start doing this circuit, you realize there's like a very similar amphitheater in a lot of major centers.
Yeah.
They look very similar. And that's basically the circuit that we did. So it was always Willie at the end of the night. John Fogerty was on a bunch of them.
Wow,
Uh,
cool.
Government Mule was on a few, and I'm a huge Government Mule fan.
Hmm.
And Kathleen and Warren know each other a little bit because they did that last Waltz tour together, which is now got to be 2 years ago, I guess. And Who else was on it? Flatland Cavalry, who's sort of like a more of a pop country band from Lubbock, Texas, home of Buddy Holly.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and Who else was on? There was Kurt Vile was on the first night, which
Oh,
I
cool.
I caught a little bit of him, but like we were so fresh to the tour, and I think we had to drive that night, so I only caught a little bit. Um, and Yeah, I mean, it's a very well organized tour. A good buddy of mine plays in Margot Price's band, and they had done that same tour, I think, multiple times, but in the few previous years. And he was like, "Man, there's no easier tour to do. You're going to hang out in catering all day. You're going to play your show, and then you're going to see Willie Nelson every night." I
I
was
mean,
like,
that's a
"Yeah,
really good sell.
absolutely." And that's pretty much what I did. Like any night that we didn't have to drive, I just watched the Willie Nelson concert, and from side stage, it was incredible. And so Willie's son Micah, he has this project called Particle Kid, and he would open every show. He was first on every day, and then he played in Willie's band as well. Willie's sister Bobby passed a number at this point, maybe 5 years ago. She was the piano player, and pretty like integral to the Willie and the Family band. Like, Willie and the Family kind of dates to 73, where it's Bobby and Mickey Raphael, who's still there, the harmonica player.
Hmm.
And so I think they just needed an extra person. And I think it's a bit of a revolving door. But anyway, Micah was doing this tour where he like played guitar, sang all the harmonies with Willie. And it was really lovely. Willie does like a couple of Micah songs in the show, which is like really, and
That's really sweet.
of course, and you think to yourself off the bat, you're like, all right, whatever. Like you're Willie Nelson's kid. Doesn't mean you can fucking write like Willie Nelson, but he is actually an incredible writer, and the
Wow.
songs are totally worthy of being in the show. It's not when you hear the songs, you're not like, fuck it, Willie. Like it's not a beer song. It's like, oh,
Yes.
okay, we get it. It runs in the family.
Right,
Um,
right, right.
I got to be a little friendly with Micah, not too much, but like he's a lovely guy, and to be honest, his vibe to me is more Neil Young than it is Willie Nelson. And then hilariously, after that tour ended in the fall, he ended up joining Crazy Horse.
Oh,
Uh,
wow. Wow.
yeah, I mean, obviously Willie and Neil,
There are
Micah's brother
overlapping.
Lucas, yeah, had
Yeah.
been doing Promise of the Real and all that. So anyway, yeah, like when I would watch his set every day, Micah's set, I would just think to myself, man, this is like obviously he loves Neil Young, like he's got a very Neil Young thing going on, and it was just kind of funny that they kind of connected.
Yeah, that's great. Well, man, you're I have a bunch of avenues I want to go in just based on what you're
Yeah,
talking about. But for a
sure.
little bit, let's go backwards. Like, what was it like starting playing? I don't want to get into necessarily the nitty gritty of it, but like maybe let's talk about when did you first begin playing music professionally, either for yourself or as another part of a band or whatever.
Okay, well, the last day job I had, I'm pretty sure was in 2009. And
Whoa, so it's been a little while
yeah,
now. You've been
I'm
okay, yeah.
I'm 41. I was born in 83. So in 2009 I was 20. What? No. Yeah,
Born in 81, is that what you said?
83. So '03 I
83.
was 20,
So you were
and
like
'09 I
26,
was 20.
27?
Yeah, 27. To be honest, I had a couple things after that, a couple like warehouse, like, brief things. But I worked at Long and McQuaid for a while, in Burlington and then in Toronto for a bit. Um,
What
and that
was
was a
that
great
like?
job. It
Yeah.
was great. I have to say the Burlington store, and it's a whole different thing now. Like the store has moved and it's different people there. But at the time, I had this boss named Norm Thornton, and I don't know if he's retired now. He ended up becoming the regional manager. But anyway, Norm, I mean, he didn't suffer any bullshit, but he definitely had done time on the road himself. He was a front of house guy, still is a front of house guy. But he worked for Crowbar for years, the old Canadian blues rock band.
Yep.
And so he was sort of understanding about having to go for gigs and stuff like that.
I think that's
And
what you
he,
need.
yeah, you couldn't totally fly the coop, but he definitely would help you make it work.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that was sort of the mentality of that Burlington store. It was a little bit more of an outpost. It had been its own store for a long time before it became a Long Quid. And I think they kind of had sort of their own mentality. Because once I started working in Toronto, it was a little tighter. It was a little like, you can't
Yeah.
really. Uh, but when I was leaving Burlington, Norm sat me in his office and just gave me a very frank. He was happy. He was proud of me, and he was happy that I was going to figure it out. But sorry, my phone's making noise.
Oh, it's all good.
But he basically was like, the only thing I can tell you is save your summer money for the winter, and he's exactly right still
Dude,
because
that's good advice for anyone, like not even
sure,
music. That's just good advice.
yeah. I mean, summer's a busy season for me because of the festivals, and I can bet it's still very difficult to know when things are going to be busy in the studio, but I know that January is going to be quiet always. Just
Right.
because no matter which way you slice it, even bands that have deals or artists that have deals, more or less you're paying for your own record. Whether it's going to be recouped or whether you're just paying out of pocket and then licensing it or whatever. Um, More so than ever, people are either opting or out of necessity to pay for their own record.
Yeah.
So after Christmas, they don't tend to want to uh, fork out fork out the dough. So that was good advice from Norm. And the reason I did that finally was well, I was playing pedal steel, and I started about like mid '06 or so, I would say.
Hmm.
And um, it's the kind of instrument that I still feel like a novice on it, and it's a total lifetime to master kind of thing. Like the
Hmm.
masters of the instrument are getting towards the end of their lives as opposed to the beginning. Um, but I also found that you can make pleasing music on it very quickly if you are good with pitch and stuff like that. So I was in a position where like I knew a handful of moves on the guitar on the steel guitar, and
Which is
was
often enough for
yeah, I
uh
was I was playing on my friend's records, and I was living in Hamilton, and got to a point within a year or so where I was sort of like, I mean, this may be ignorant. There was probably many musicians that were older than me who had never heard of me and were never calling me, but in my circle, I was playing with whomever was making like an alt country record. And I also have to say, this era was so fertile for something like alternative country because my friends and I were all obsessed with Ryan Adams and Wilco,
hmm.
and
Hmm.
and that was a good era for his record. I mean, for whatever we think of Ryan Adams now,
Yeah.
2005 he put out Cold Roses, which is a monumental record, Jacksonville City Nights, and 29, which is kind of a sleeper. That's the third one. And then the next year, Easy Tiger. Like those are for me and for the people that I came up with, those are massive records because uh, they're not. I mean, they are a little bit pastiche. They are a little bit like especially Jacksonville. It's a little bit like let's make a country music
Yeah,
record,
let's do the thing. Yeah.
right? But the songs, the writing on those records is is great. It's just it sets a standard for me anyhow. And
Absolutely.
and yeah, a lot of people that I was coming up with, uh, there were people who turned me onto those records, and then people that I turned onto those records, and we all really like consumed them voraciously.
And like
Uh,
you mentioned, Wilco, fucking dope. One of the best
yeah,
alt country bands, especially Uncle Tupelo, if you go backwards too. Like,
total.
so good.
So Sky Blue Sky came out, I want to say in '07, and for some Wilco people, that's like a later Wilco record that's not even as cool as Yankee Hotel or Being There or
Or Summer Teeth.
Summer Teeth or AM or whatever. For me, that was the first Wilco I ever heard. A friend of mine turned me onto that record, and I came up as a kid not knowing country music and not knowing any punk rock. Like I didn't meet people who grew up going to church basement shows until I was later in my 20s. When I
Hmm.
was growing up, I went to like the Hebrew day school, and there was no like punk rock didn't exist to me at all. I wasn't even aware of it. I was aware of um, like when I was a kid, I became obsessed with Buddy Holly, Chuck Berry, Fats Domino, whatever. And then as I grew, I got into Hendrix, Black Sabbath, really into Black Sabbath, uh, that kind of stuff. Uh,
Absolutely.
and my parents, whom I love, uh, are are not like even though they grew up in that era, to them, Hendrix and Sabbath is like heavy metal, way too loud and heavy for them to even absorb. So for me to listen to that, it was as rebellious as my later friends who grew up in Niagara, for example, going to punk rock shows. It was the
Wow.
same kind of thing. It was like this is loud. It pisses my parents off, um, you know, and I love it.
That's
So
enough for a lot of teens.
totally. So to be turned on to Sky Blue Sky in particular, uh, it's definitely, it, of course, has like country elements and all that shit, but it's for all intents and purposes, it's very much a classic rock record with a lot of guitar playing and a lot of like composed parts that are vaguely proggy almost. And
Harmonized guitar leads and stuff like that.
yeah, and that really spoke to my love of whatever, like everything from Jethro Tull to the Sabbath and the Zeppelin and
Totally.
Neil Young in there too,
Yep.
Um, so yeah, that record like really spoke to me. You good? You good? It's all good. I got a band here,
Oh no, it's
uh,
all good.
Edmonton, Edmonton, right?
Yeah.
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 um, you guys good down there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, you know how to reach me.
Awesome.
Yeah, no worries. Um,
Yeah, well,
so
no, that's great to hear about. How does it begin to how does it begin to almost get into more of like a business thing on your end? You said you were already beginning to play on a bunch of
interesting question. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was yes, I was playing on some friends' records. At the outset, as with anything, when you're, okay, my dad's an accountant. He still works actually, and he's very much he's fairly risk averse, and he's a very like this must make sense in order for it to be a thing.
Hmm.
Which, of course, he needs to be that way. That's his profession.
Absolutely.
I I started to play steel guitar, and I was just like, I want to play with the people who write the best songs, who ask me to do it. I'm only interested in like being involved in the best shit. So of course he would, I'd speak to him a few times a week, and he'd be like, "All right, so you went and played on Tuesday night. How much did you bring home?" And I'd be like, "Look, Dad, it was $30." And he would be
Yeah.
like, "How is this sustainable?"
Which is a fair question.
Absolutely. Um, and I would just be like, "Look, you know, I didn't know how to articulate it at the time, but I think I understood that like my career was only going to be as good as my resume, and I wanted the resume to align with my tastes. And I've always sort of believed in my own taste, even if I don't believe in my own abilities. At least I believe in my taste.
I
And
completely understand what you mean.
yeah, and so I was just like, okay, somebody with good songs calls, wants me to play with them. Like, yeah, I'll show up. Like, yeah, I'll play on the record. And yeah, it got to a point where like I was earning little bits of money. And then like let me also say it wasn't as though I started to make this massive amount of money
No,
doing
no,
it.
no, of
And
course.
then I was like, I'm gonna quit my job.
No.
Uh, but I will say that like there were a few people in Hamilton that hired me early on and paid me some money. And the first guy who really paid me like real money, like adult money, was Tom Wilson, with whom I still play as
Cool.
often as I can. And we met because I played in this band called the Surly Young Bucks. It was like my first country rock band. Um, and it was actually with the members of the Surly Young Bucks was Max Kerman and Mike DeAngelis and Dan Griffin, who were all in Arkells.
Yeah,
Uh,
wow.
at the time, it was still called Charlemagne, and
Mm-hmm.
there was kind of like one summer where maybe the drummer left or Dan Griffin was replacing the drummer. Anyway, Charlemagne wasn't doing anything for a summer, so for like pretty much one summer, the Surly Young Bucks kind of became the focus for all of us for a minute. But that was the band where I first started playing pedal steel, and they encouraged me, even though I was so bad, they encouraged me to bring it to gigs and just to play. I have to give them thanks and credit for
No,
that.
that's awesome.
And also, those were the guys, Max, Mike, Dan, who turned me on to those records I'm mentioning. They were the guys who showed me Ryan Adams, and the guys who showed me Sky Blue Sky,
Huh.
and the guy who took me to my first Constantine's show, and Weaker Than's. Like I was still so I had a long ponytail, and I was essentially like the comic book guy, and I was still so I had my blinders on, and I was still listening to like I remember the previous year before I met those guys, or maybe the same year, I was like obsessed with After the Gold Rush, the Neil Young record, which is an amazing record. But like that was my world. I was like in 1972,
Yes.
71 or whatever. And they were like, "Hey, there's actually new music that is just as good as this. You should check it out." And that was so foreign to me. Like when I was in grade six, I got into Green Day and stuff like that, and I had a bit of a phase with like that like Nirvana, Soundgarden, all that stuff. I still love those records, but I was not listening to any new indie rock. Uh, I didn't
Hmm.
think there was anything for me at all. Those were the guys who were like, "Listen to these records." So I'm in that band, and they encouraged me to bring out the pedal steel, and I start, the wheels start turning in my head, and I'm like, how does this band get better? How do we get farther? And I realize living in Hamilton, where I was living at the time, is this guy, Tom Wilson, who is like kind of an internationally known Americana songwriter. And I checked out like I knew of Junk House a little bit. I didn't really know about Black Indie Rodeo Kings. I checked some of that out. Um, Actually, maybe I didn't check it out, to be honest. There was no streaming then. Um, but I just knew that he was around. And so I sent him a message on MySpace. And that was like how you communicated at the time.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Hey, I go to Mac. I have this country rock band. I think it's like kind of up your alley. And would you come to a show? Like, I want to invite you. We're playing at the Casbah." And he wrote back. He's like, "Yeah, sure, I'll come. Put me on the list." So I did, and he brought his daughter, who ended up being a friend of mine. And Yeah, he loved the show. I mean, we were so raw and bad, but I think he understood where our hearts were at.
Yeah.
And then at some point, I think it was that night after our set, he was like, "Hey, I want to do something with you. I don't know what yet, but I'm going to call you." And I had played steel that night too. So he later called me to like play. He had a couple things going on. I played a couple sessions. There was a studio opening. I played the party with him, and then he was making the first Lee Harvey Osmond record, which is this project of his that lasted like more than 10 years. It was 4 records. He made it with Mike Timmons from the Cowboy Junkies, and he called me to play on that record. I went in for maybe a day or two to the Cowboy Junkies studio. That's really like among my first real professional sessions where I got paid a real amount of money and I contributed to this record that like came out for real. And I ended up in that project like for its duration, and we ended up with a Juno, and I
Yeah.
did a lot of touring with him, and I still do the Junk House stuff with him, which is so fulfilling and great. Tom is like um, definitely a mentor. I mean, a friend for sure, but yeah, a mentor and kind of a guy that I look to for not necessarily advice, but I like to sort of check out like how he works and how he makes it work.
I think you
And
need those people starting out.
for sure. And
Yeah.
Tom is definitely the kind of guy who, and he would be the first to admit this. He was, he was an addict for a long time. He's been 20 years sober now.
Damn.
But I think when he got sober, he really kind of like shifted his energy into work. He like knows how to work. and he knows how to like take the thing that he has going on and monetize it in a way where he doesn't compromise his artistry. He can still write and perform the way he wants. He's painting, and his paintings have taken off huge. Like, it's become a big thing for him. There was like a play. He wrote a book, and then there was a play that was based on the book, and I went to see it in Hamilton. Like, he really is the kind of guy who has said, okay, like, here's what I have going for me, and here's the way that I'm going to continue to make this a living as time goes on. He still tours with Blackie. He's still, there's not really a Lee Harvey Osmond anymore, but he's doing like a kind of a solo Tom thing. And yeah, he's just always kind of doing stuff. And
No,
I know,
I love this example. Sorry, just to
that's okay.
briefly,
Yeah.
I actually have two questions. First is super quick. Was your dad
Yeah.
a lot happier once you were starting to get good pay and stuff like that?
Yeah. I mean, well, it could be argued that I've never really gotten steady good pay, but no, my parents,
A Juno
and
has to mean something to your dad.
yeah, well, they have, my parents have, there was a time when they were not as supportive of this, and they kind of made a shift because I think they were kind of like, my God, he's going to do it anyway. So like, we might as well just jump on. What my parents really love, and I can totally understand, but like, if I'm at Massey, they love to come to Massey. They love to like have a nice seat and see me in a nice place.
Yes.
And sometimes I gently remind them, like, when I fucking slept on floors for years, and like I don't really anymore, but it's been kind of more recent than you think that I've had to like sleep on floors on the tour. That was necessary in order to get here. Like all the shit that I ate,
Yes,
like
yeah. You don't just walk out of the wings onto the Massey Hall stage. It's
right,
a
right.
gradual.
Um, and I'd like to think that to some degree I paid a good amount of dues, and I feel good about that.
Yeah.
Um, and that goes like across all different acts that I played with, and things that I did, tours that I took, and whatever. Um, I don't know if you saw on my Instagram a couple weeks ago. I'm not a very public like Instagram. Like, I post a lot of pictures of sessions and stuff like that, but I don't really like to come out with a bunch of feelings on Instagram. I don't think
I
it's
did
like,
see this. I know what you're referring
yeah,
to.
I don't think it's that beneficial to me necessarily. However, in this life, when you're a freelancer, especially in the music business, uh, you experience these peaks and valleys, and that's just a part of life. And I know that I've spoken to peers of mine who are on all rungs of the ladder, and they all experience this. Whether you are like, if you're playing to 20,000 people or 20 people,
Hmm.
there will be times when like you're hot and times when you're not, times when you're getting calls and you're turning people away, and other times when you're like, I'll take anything. Uh, and that's just kind of, that's the way it goes. So I posted this little thing about it, just to say like, I it's been slow lately, and I'm hoping to like do more work. Uh, and uh, Why did I bring this up? What were you asking me about my parents, right?
Yeah, and just I guess maybe the reason, if I can guess, the reason you're bringing it up is because you're sort of it's sort of an example of what you're talking about, that there are these peaks and valleys no matter how successful you seem from the outside.
Exactly, exactly. I remember talking to Max Kerman,
Yeah.
who like we met in university, so we met pretty much 20 years ago, and we still talk. Occasionally, I've had like little collaborations with them, like done some studio stuff with them.
Cool.
And I remember him once saying to me, like, man, you might look at us and think like we got it made, like, two nights at the Bud stage, whatever. And he was like, but when we're at our level, we're shooting to open for Springsteen.
They're
And
looking up.
yeah,
Yes,
and,
exactly.
and they're shooting us down over and over again.
Yeah.
And there's always like, you're always trying to progress. And the nature of this business is that you will suffer rejection over and over. And you really need to like, you got to develop that thick skin, or else like it's not a business for you. First of all, as the son of the accountant here, it's kind of barely a business. Like, it's really like, it's a
Yes.
fucking cesspool where like people will take advantage of you, and there are so many pretenders, so
Yeah.
many fucking poser ass like people who people who think they're doing something artistic and good and they're just taking a shit. And like I have no problem saying that because fuck all those people. And
Oh, I'm yeah,
when I meet someone who is real and I get their art, like I embrace them. And there are plenty of those people around still, and God bless them. Uh,
absolutely.
the older I get, the less I'm interested. And of course, we all have to eat, and this is my job, and I do need to earn money. But
Yes.
the less I'm interested um, in the commerce of it because it just does all it means is that you pander to an audience. Like there's a kind of art that you make for yourself, and then there's a kind of art that you aim at a demographic, and that is the shit I am not interested in. I want my shit to be accessible. I do consider the audience, but I consider an audience that has like a degree of taste the way I do. And I don't
Yes.
care if whatever, if that sounds
No, no. I think more people
pretentious.
need to be as honest as you are. Like,
Sure.
uh, I feel the exact same way.
It's like I'll tell you, I was listening to Chris Robinson, the Black
Hmm.
Rose singer, on Marin, and
I haven't listened to that interview yet, but should I?
yes,
Okay.
I thought it was great. It's a little muddled at the beginning. It's a little out of sorts, and then it gets somewhere. And you know, sorry, what was I just saying?
Sorry, I cut you
No,
off
it's fine. It's
again.
fine. We were talking about.
I
Uh,
guess we're, I guess it's sort of about, are you going to bring it up of career and looking up and that kind of thing
oh
again?
yeah. He basically right. So yes, Chris was saying when he grew up in the 70s, if he came across like another guy in the road wearing a Black Sabbath shirt, that was like immediately, oh, we're the same. And you would go and talk to that person. Hey, how's it going? I'm Chris. What other records do you listen to? Like, just trying to glean information uh, about something that, like,
It's a
information was more scarce at the time about everything.
yeah,
Um, and that's kind of like I know that world is gone, like that time is gone, but that is kind of the kind of world that I'm interested in, like where people share records that they're interested in with their friends. With you find out about records that way. You find out about records about other people with similar taste. Uh,
it's a
that's
way to find kindred spirits.
yeah.
Yeah.
That said, I still find shit from the algorithm and I don't care. I don't care that it wasn't provided to me by a human. I'm fine with the algorithm giving me something that it thinks I'll be interested in. Sometimes I'm not, but sometimes I totally am. And it's something I've never heard of and I don't care. When it comes to replacing humans, if it's something like that where like the algorithm's going to do a similar job, that's fine.
Right.
When it's something like playing my pedal steel part on a MIDI keyboard, fuck all of that. Like, not interested
Yes. Okay. I can see what you mean.
in that type of human replacement. Or when it comes to, you know, how long do you think it's going to be before AI is just fully writing songs? I mean, I'm sure
I
it's
think
already.
exactly. I think it's already there, unfortunately. Yeah, that's a scary, it's a
Yeah,
scary avenue we could go down, but maybe not yet.
totally.
I know no, I love how honest you're being about all of this, and that's just the reality. It's the changing reality, you know. Um,
Yeah, I think I don't know. I'm not terribly interested in like current pop music, and I don't care if people are. I understand why they are. Also, a lot of what I like was once considered pop music, just not in this era. Um,
Totally,
but
that's lost on so many people.
yeah, but I am a bit of a like nostalgic curmudgeon, and I really just want to like make a kind of music that was palatable like 40 years ago or so. That would have been interesting then as it is now.
I know what
Uh,
you mean.
and again, as I grow older, there was a time when I was like, okay, maybe my unique set of skills will meld with some new popular thing and I'll be able to contribute effectively and be paid to contribute to something that is like new and marketable and that sells, such as pop country or
Right.
whatever. And I've dipped my toe a little bit in that stuff, and like it was extremely unfulfilling,
It just
unfortunately.
feels icky, maybe, or what?
Yeah, it feels like it's like that Bo Burnham. He has that country song about pandering. Like that's
Yeah.
exactly what that is.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's like here's the box. Let's fucking fit right in this box. And
Absolutely.
it's the most boring thing in the world for me. That I will also say there are people in that world who write great songs. It doesn't great songs come in all different clothes. There's EDM shit that is well written. There's all kinds of shit. There's,
Absolutely.
there's plenty that is like has missed the point entirely. That is
Yes.
that is an aesthetic with no guts. And that's
Well,
why I say that this industry
is
is
a
unfortunately
cesspool.
rife with fucking posers.
Yes.
Um,
Well, I want to
and
reference two people who I know have worked with you who are not posers and are great symbols
okay,
of local talent.
okay,
One of the first people I ever played with on a bill, maybe that I didn't know when I was younger, is Tired Kid.
yes, Tom Kelly, who also plays in my
Excellent.
band now. Yeah,
Yes, right. That's what I thought. Yeah. Not
fine
only is
individual,
he a great person, but a great songwriter.
absolutely.
And the other person I was going to mention is Baby O,
Yes,
who has been
they're
on the podcast already, but
oh
they're
nice.
awesome. Yeah.
Yes, they're fantastic. But both excellent people, excellent writers. So Tom was one of the early sessions that I did at my last studio, Baldwin Street Sound. So I remember there was a renovation there about 9 months in, and his first session was before the renovation. So again, one of my first clients at that studio, and he came out of I don't know where. Like I think he knew of my playing with Dan Romano, um, and we clicked on a lot of levels. We clicked on his writing is just so it's that like slacker guitar rock that I just love. Like it's
With country leaning though, in my opinion.
yeah, totally.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like a very like 90s kind of thing, but yes, he nods heavily to country in like a Neil Young kind of way, but
Yeah.
then also on a personal level, it's not always really reflected in his writing, but he's a massive prog fan. So we get along on like Jethro Tull and uh all that stuff.
That's funny. I wouldn't have guessed that. Yeah, because of based on his writing. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he can sit at the Hammond organ in the studio and riff a bunch of Jethro Tull stuff, uh,
Wow.
which is very impressive to me. I can't do that.
No, no, no.
No, and I just really love his writing. It's funny. I had a conversation with him the other night
Oh, really?
about about his writing and my affinity for it, and how I'm lucky when someone who writes at that level walks in the door, even though he was like pretty green when he walked in terms of like he hadn't played a lot of shows, he'd never made a record.
Yeah.
But like when the writing is like at a certain level, when you realize that he has like an understanding of songcraft that is hard to it's hard to
Peach.
convey, it's hard to teach, right? Um, in a lot of ways, like when someone's a good writer, it's like you can tell that they've like figured something out. They've like put a puzzle
Absolutely.
together.
It's a little bit
And
of what you were saying about taste too.
yeah, and so Tom like from the jump had clearly like put together the puzzle and figured out um how to be a great writer. And Liv too. Liv also walked in with some excellent tunes.
She's
And
fantastic. Yeah. Or they're
totally,
fantastic. I mean, yeah.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, it was also their first thing. Like Tom and I have now done an EP and an LP. His LP, I think, is incredible, and he had to sort of quietly put it out in COVID, and it didn't really get a lot of traction. But the songs are amazing, and I literally, it's not often that I go back to my own work and listen, but I do listen to that record sometimes because I like it a lot. Um,
Can you
and
remind me the name of it? Because I can picture the album cover.
uh, the first one is, I have to
It
look up.
okay,
Um,
because I played with him long enough ago when he only had a 3 song EP out, and the
yeah,
picture
yeah,
is
that's
like
the
just of
first one.
him. Okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
and the second one, I will tell you. Uh,
It's like him animated on the front, sort of,
yeah,
or
yeah, yeah, it's a
painted.
little cartoon.
Yeah.
Um, I
Damn, I
like
wish I. Sorry, repeat that.
I like my own company,
Ah, yes, which is also such a
which
great
is
name.
yeah, one of the tunes on the record. But
Yes.
the the first song on the record is called Pat's Traveling Device, and it's literally Tom's imagination of the friendship between the actors Patrick Stewart and Ian, the guy who,
McKellen?
yeah, yeah. Um, and it's about how they must like talk about their roles and like share quips about the process and all that stuff. But it's so well put together.
That's fantastic. I've heard that song. I didn't know that was specifically what
Yeah.
it's about.
And there's just like there's a bit of a thread on the record of like that scenario comes back in another song later in the record. Like
Mm.
verse 2 is like harkens back to this Pat and Ian thing. Um, it's just a very clever record. And I mean, I love the guy. He's a blast to be around, and he's a great musician. And so that's how he ended up in my band. I was just like, well, I need someone who can do keys and guitar and vocal all capably, and who
He's
will like learn the tunes. And he just did all that.
he's great at all of those things you're referencing, but for some reason I really love his voice.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
not fancy. He's not a Christina Aguilera belter
Right,
or anything,
right,
but
right.
he has this tone, this
Yeah,
natural tone that just it's so perfect for the kind of music he makes.
totally.
Well, that's fantastic to hear about both of them and to hear to get confirmation he's as nice and talented as I thought he was.
Yeah.
Uh, well, let's talk a bit about your music, man.
Sure.
The first question I usually ask is, well, I guess this doesn't have to be specifically your music. It can just be who you've played with or your own. But
Mhm.
what do you think was your best gig, your best memory of a gig?
Interesting. Yeah, I did know this was coming, and I didn't settle on one. I can think of a few for different reasons. Um, I mean, certainly, I played in the live band with City and Color for about a year and a half at most, and played some very memorable shows
That
with
must have
that.
been cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I had already done like 3 trips with Cowboy Junkies, which was awesome also, but a totally different thing,
Yeah.
uh, and not the same size shows. But so getting into City and Color was like a much bigger deal. He's like a currently popular
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah.
Um,
Your dad's in the background just making it rain with the money that
yeah,
you're
yeah,
giving him.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. My parents came to Massey Hall, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
you know, Molson Amphitheater and all that stuff.
hmm
Um, we played at Bonnaroo and at Lollapalooza on those, and like Austin City Limits Festival and Voodoo Fest in New Orleans. Like those are sort of oh, and twice at Oshiega. Um, those collectively are some pretty good memories of doing those big
Festival gigs.
festivals. 2 nights at the Roundhouse in London. Um,
Wow.
yeah, certainly formative for me in terms of like my biggest touring at the time, and my uh, the farthest I had gone
Yeah.
uh, to play music. Um,
You mean distance wise, literally the
yeah,
farthest you've
yeah,
gone.
yeah,
Yeah.
and um, and yeah, getting to play like steel guitar as a fairly young person in as part of a somewhat popular act, like it was pretty cool at the time. It definitely felt good.
Yeah.
Uh, but also, after that, after I parted with Dallas, Daniel Romano had done the same. He had been in City and Color as well,
Oh,
and
I
then
didn't know that.
yeah, oh, yeah, yeah. Daniel's the one who got me that job, really, because
Oh,
he's a pretty early collaborator of Dallas's. Like Dallas's first record is solo, but the second and third ones, Dan plays a bunch of guitar and was sort of there.
oh wow.
Um, and had played in the live band earlier and then was drafted back into the live band. And I had just joined Dan's band, and I think Dan sort of suggested that Dallas check me out. So anyway, Dan left as well because he got his record deal. And then I toured with Dan for quite a long time. And there's a lot of good memories from that time as well, there was this one in particular I can remember in Lyon, in France, where we played. We played in this club that was a boat that was like permanently attached to this, to the side of a river or something,
That's so cool.
just like by a bridge kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they had turned it into this rock club, and I don't know how many people it held, like 110 or something. Like it was pretty small, and
Yeah.
it's like you're in the hull of a boat, and it's all like corrugated steel all around you. And that show was incredible because it was packed and so sweaty and just like perfect.
How did,
And
just quickly, what does the sound like if it's all corrugated steel?
I mean,
You're like, who cares? It was a dope ass place.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
amazing.
Okay.
It was loud.
Yeah.
The thing about Daniel, and I'm sure this is the same now with his current lineup and the lineups he's had since I've been there. Um, but he really has a pretty high standard for the show, rightfully so.
Yeah.
And it's not even, to be honest, it's not difficult to attain. Like I played in a few different lineups with him, and every one of them was ferocious. Like
Yeah.
the band was just always on top of our game. And we were always, maybe this is shitty of us, but we always were like, we're the best fucking band around. Like nobody can touch us.
You have to
And
believe that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And maybe that's like his attitude and it kind of like trickled down to us. I don't know. But I have to say, uh, being on stage in that band was extremely fulfilling artistically. Um, I loved the songs. Obviously, I was a fan of the songs, and getting to play that material was like, was great. And getting up every night, you felt invincible. I felt invincible because,
I really think you need to think that to pull off the kind of outward perception that they're giving off.
yeah,
Like, I think that's not lost on audiences that they have, he and everybody else in his band. It probably is kind of a trickle down thing, like you're saying. You all, your back's a little straighter, you have a little more
yeah,
confidence and that kind of thing. Like, even I've found that, like I'm a working musician or whatever, and I don't have any. I think I'm a good songwriter, and you need to
mhm,
think that
yeah,
to continue. It's the
totally
carrot of the cart that's pulling you forward. You know what I mean?
true. It's true. Yeah, yeah, because truly nobody will believe in you the way that you can believe in yourself.
Well said.
Maybe that's a little hippity dippity, but
We're musicians. We should
yeah,
be open to that.
it is kind of the truth. Even like, if you obtain success and you're surrounded with team and people who are like, who are gassing you up and stuff like that, like it's really going to go nowhere unless you can look in the mirror and say like, fuck yeah.
Yeah,
And unfortunately, or however you want to look at it, but that is the kind of attitude that can be difficult on your relationships. Like you got to have the ego,
yeah. It's a
or
delicate
else
balance.
I've heard, I don't know Neil Young, but I've heard that he basically is like he follows the muse to whatever end that is. And if the muse says cancel this crazy horse tour that you're about to go on because you need to hook up with Promise the Real instead, then he has to be like, sorry guys, you thought you were going to work for 2 years and now you're not.
Which is probably super fucking frustrating, but
Yeah,
also
I'm
he's
sure.
he's not Neil Young without acting that way. I see exactly
Right.
what you're saying.
I mean, like maybe I would hope that he would pay the guys out, but you never know.
Yeah,
And yeah, so a guy like Dan, Dan is a singularity. He like uh, I don't know anybody who writes at that level so consistently and with such volume. Like he really
right.
just churns out such high quality shit. Um, there's really nobody like him, and in order for him to do that, he's got to be like, I'm the fucking greatest. Um, I'm sure he also, just like everybody, has his moments where he's like, "Fuck all this. This is garbage," but he gets through it somehow. Anyway, that night in Lyon, I felt that invincibility. We were so on fire that literally nothing could stop us, and it was a tour. It was a bit of a weird transitional band where It was Dan and Kay Burkle and me and Ryan Peters on drums. He did it for about 2 years when Ski didn't do it. And
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, it was. Oh, and Roddy.
Yeah.
Roddy was played bass. Um, and yeah,
So,
it was incredible.
so basically, yeah, no, those are great answers. So basically, you're saying obviously the big festival ones with City and Color and stuff were
Yeah,
dope shows for
yeah.
reasons we'd all understand,
Uh-huh.
but this specific Leon show was sort of more what you're talking about, where that was the intangible feeling.
Absolutely. One
Yes,
other I have to say,
please do.
I did get to do. I've done Massey 8 or 9 times with, and it never gets old. It's never like
Man.
another day at Massey Hall. It's always like, oh, I'm at Massey Hall. And one of the last ones I did was they inducted Neil Young into the Canadian Songwriters Hall of Fame, and Arkells asked me to come sit in with them. So I went and did like Cinnamon Girl and
Wow.
Free World with Neil like in the third row, and afterwards, like I had this split second where I got to meet him, where he was literally being like led along the line of us performers and just like shaking hands and saying hello. And I was like, what do I say to this man
Hmm.
whose body of work has like changed me? It means so much to me. And all I could muster was, nice to meet you.
That's how it always ends. Hey,
Yeah,
maybe he preferred that. You want to
yeah,
be
probably,
treated, you want to
probably.
be treated like a person,
Uh-huh.
right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
That's so funny. Him just like, oh, thanks. That's really
Yeah.
great. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, okay. Well, what about worst gig?
Hmm. Okay. I again should have put some more thought into this. I can think of some pretty bad ones. I can think of
Everybody's got them.
yeah, and bad for different reasons. The first
Hmm.
one that comes to mind is also with Dan Romano. Earlier than the like before we ever went to Europe, and I was playing. I don't remember if I was playing my Carter steel or if I already had the black Showbud, but I was playing a steel where not to get too deep into it, but basically there's 10 strings on a pedal steel, and the pedals and the levers they bend different strings to give you different chord combinations. There's an adjustment of how far the string gets bent, and you can fine adjust it because you want the open string to be in tune, and then you want when the pedal's down, you want that to be in tune.
Of course.
So there's a little adjustment on the butt end. I didn't realize that. I don't know if this happens anymore with new guitars, but on old guitars, when you change the strings, you want to put that adjustment roughly in the middle so that there's roughly an equal amount of travel, sharp and flat, so that you can tune if you need to. I didn't know about this. When I got into pedal steel, like there was an internet, but it wasn't like there was a lot of information.
Yeah.
Um, I basically got a lot of my information from a DVD that came with my first pedal steel. Anyway, I hadn't done that, and I could not figure out why I restrung it and I was ready to go, and we played in Sudbury at this thing that was like 50 seats, but it was sold out. We played in this tiny chapel. Somebody promoted this show. So again, there was like fans of Dan's there. He had already had a few records out, but it was this super intimate. I think it was like a chapel of some kind.
Wow.
Um, and it was me, it might have been me and Dan as a duo. I don't remember if it was trio or what. Anyway, I go to play and none of my pedals will work. So I have the open tuning, but none of the different chords.
Ooh.
They just wouldn't because all of these nuts, like the tuning nuts, were all driven all the way in by accident.
Oof.
So I have to play the entire show just like sliding up and down the neck. And I was, I didn't know
Oh.
what was going on. And again, there's 50 people there. Like the people in the front row are like in front of me looking at the pedal steel.
Yeah, you'd almost rather a festival gig for that to happen.
Yeah, I'm like, this is insane. This is garbage. Um,
Oof.
yeah, it was very difficult. I got through it. I mean, how many people actually knew what was going on? Probably none,
Right.
to be honest.
Maybe the band a little bit,
Yeah,
but
right.
yeah.
I think it was the Black Showbud, which is my 76, just whatever, a road guitar that I've had for a while that now just lives in the studio.
Hmm.
I remember I was playing the same guitar. This is not a worst gig, but definitely a worst moment at a
Okay.
great gig,
Yeah.
also at Massey with Bry Webb, 2014 or 15. And there's a song in the set. First of all, the band already had two steel players. It was me on pedal steel and Rich Burnett on lap steel. And
Okay.
we were at opposite ends of the stage. We kind of flanked the stage. My old dear friend Anna Ruddick was the bass player. She played upright. Tom Hamilton on keys. Nathan Lohr on drums. Bry Webb singing. So there's a song in the set where everybody else doesn't play, and it's just Bry with the acoustic and me and Rich both on steels. This very moody tune from his first record called Rivers of Gold. So I have a big solo in the song right before. At the end of the song, I'm ripping my solo and I break a string. And knew I knew leading up to that gig, I was like, these strings are feeling a bit old. I just like didn't do it. I don't know why.
You can lie
Break.
to yourself. If they have character, and then be like,
Yeah,
fuck it.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, true. No, they were sounding fine. They
Yeah.
weren't fun, but they were sounding fine.
Yeah.
Now I'm in this mode now where I like new strings a lot, but I didn't always. So anyway, I break this string and I'm just like, what the fuck do I do?
Oh,
So basically Rich covers the entire song for me because this next song starts. They can't wait. You
yeah, of
know, it's a
course.
oh, they're on time, right? Uh, so Rich covers the entire song. It's Bry and Rich. The rest of the band sitting somberly at their instruments because this is a somber ass song, and I am frantically opening up my case, finding the string. You have to stand over the steel to string it because you have to like loop it into this little thing and then get it in. And then I'm frantically
Right.
rotating this string winder, just like, oh God, oh God, oh God. Can I can I fit, can I get it? Can I tune it? And I got it on and tuned it in time to hit the last, like there's a little figure at the end of the song. Do,
Wow.
do, 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 and I played that. Uh,
Lovely.
and it felt insane. I felt vindicated that I had finished it, but I felt badly for missing that tune. It's a great tune. And then that set became a live album. Like it's an LP, and I'm not on that song because I was not playing. Um,
That's hilarious.
yeah. There are plenty of gigs I can think of where there was like nobody there.
Sure.
And to be honest, that still happens a little bit. Not nobody, but fewer than you expect. And you're
Less
like,
than you'd
oh,
like or
yeah,
whatever.
you're like,
Yeah.
what am I
Yeah.
doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
um, but I always try and think back to a couple gigs that like blew my mind when I was a young person. And I remember that these two in particular gigs were way underattended, and I still had the time of my life, and they like changed my tastes. One of them was the North Mississippi All Stars at Lee's Palace in October 2003.
Wow.
So this band, obviously from North Mississippi or from south of Memphis, and it's these two brothers, Luther and Cody Dickinson, whose father was Jim Dickinson, who produced a bunch of records. He had this studio called the Zebra Ranch. He's a piano player, played on like Stones records, made the third Big Star record.
Cool.
Um,
Love Big Star.
yeah, pretty great guy. Jim was.
Yeah.
Never met him, but definitely a guy who I know some things about his career, and so there's some things about him that I like to try and pattern myself after. So his two sons, Luther and Cody, have this incredible band. I mean, it's taken a different shape now, I think. But at the time, I went to see them at Lee's, and I can remember looking around and being like, wow, there's like 50 people here. Um, and that show blew my mind open. Like I became so obsessed with that band and with other bands in their orbit. Like the early Black Keys after their first two EPs were opening for these guys, and
Oh, wow. Okay.
that's how I first heard the Black Keys was through the North Mississippi All Stars. So I
Cool.
think of that gig, and I also think of Rich Robinson from the Black Crowes had a solo record that he toured once and came through also at Lee's, excuse me, and also very underattended, like sparse.
Wow.
And I also had a great, great night. Um, Rich would probably also admit he's like not a super gifted singer, but the writing in that project was really good, and his guitar playing was amazing.
Right.
But
Oh
yeah,
yeah, he's a great guitarist. Yeah.
yeah. Any night that I'm having a weird one, or I'm just like, oh God, why is nobody here? I just think like you got to play your show every night, no matter
Totally.
what's going on in that room, because somewhere out there is 21-year-old me, and you got to like speak to that person.
Absolutely. That's an excellent point. That's a really good point. Well, fantastic. Let's
Yeah.
move forward.
Yeah.
What do you think is, and interpret this however you want. What do you
Hmm.
think is your best song?
Okay. Um, I think the best song I've ever written is on my last record. It's called Green Light Daddy Come Home. Uh, why do I think that? I don't know. I um I don't
Can you tell me
know.
about the writing of it? How did that come about?
Sure. I th- actually, where did I write it? I did like my writing process for Espanola is, I don't know if this is so different from other people, but I basically like, I really believe that like a song doesn't deserve to exist unless uh, there's some kind of hook that is the germ of the song. So I actually kind of think that I do think it's important to sit down and say, I'm going to write today. But I don't think I want to write a song is reason enough for a song to exist. Like you can sit down and say, I want to write and try and write something. But just because you wanted to doesn't mean that that piece of that composition means anything or
I know what you
deserves,
mean.
you know what I'm saying?
Just
So,
because you've created it doesn't mean it automatically should be put out.
right.
Yeah.
So I come up, if I ever have a lyric idea, it goes in a note in my phone, this one giant note where I just list pieces. And then if I have hook ideas like melodic hooks or riffs or anything like that, they go into a voice note on my phone. And then when I give myself a couple days or whatever to sit down and write, I'm doing a puzzle. I'm just like,
Mhm.
okay, what fits where and how do I fill in the blanks? So there's definitely lyrics from that song that came from the lyric note, like just random stuff. I don't 100% remember where I was when I wrote. I think I did a little writing trip to my old friend Jonas Bonetta, who has this project called Evening Hymns. He has a studio called Port William Sound that's like east of here, between Toronto and, I don't know. It's like up Highway 7. Like, Highway 7 goes across. It's parallel to the 401.
Yep.
Somewhere there north of Kingston, basically.
Yep.
And it's an amazing place. It's this property where he lives with his family, and there's a studio that's a building that he built, but there's also this cabin where you can stay. And I needed some like solitude, and I hate being the guy who's like, I went to a cabin and wrote my music, but like I'm very ADD, and I needed the solitude. So I went there for a few days, and I rented the cabin from him and did some writing, and I'm pretty sure that's where I wrote that song. Honestly, I didn't bring much with me other than like I brought Obama's book, and I was like, I'm gonna read this. He's an inspirational guy.
Totally. Yeah.
Whatever. I didn't get much into it. The song is, or sorry, the book is called Promised Land, and I
Okay.
ended up writing a song called The Promised Land Blues for the record. I'm very happy with that song, and that's the only reason it's called that is because I was looking at the cover of that book.
That's
Uh,
awesome.
I don't think anything from Greenlight came from that book necessarily.
Right.
Um, I also have this thing where, and again, like I don't claim to be the only person that this happens to, but I definitely like songs will come out and I'll be like, I don't know what the fuck this is. Like, it's a mishmash of words. And then 2 years later, I'll be like, oh, wow, it's very clear to me what this was about.
Yes, I know exactly what you
I
mean.
don't know how, I think I'm a pretty self aware person. And how did I not realize that that's exactly what this is about? So I'm not sure that I really know what Greenlight Daddy is about. I just
Sure.
know that I'm really proud of the melody and I'm proud of the way the lyrics came together. I'm not a person that thinks that like the lyrics must be airtight and foolproof to be good. I think like if it sings well and if the syllables sound good, then you're 94% there, you
Yep.
know. Um, and if you can do a thing where like the song truly means something to the listener, then you've knocked it out of the park. And if you can do that across multiple songs on a record, you're you're a genius. The problem is when people come in to make records and they're like, well, no, but the record is about this. And I'm always like, well, it doesn't matter what the record's about unless you've written it in a very clever way and it's very obvious to the listener.
I agree
Because
with you.
it may be about that to you, but it doesn't matter. It's about whatever the listener thinks it's about. Uh, um, anyway, that one, and also there's one on the new record called On Halloween that I'm really proud of.
Hmm.
And I still close the show any night I'm playing with Espinola. I still close with Outside Saskatoon, which is not a very like heavy subject matter song. It's really like a pretty surface song,
Yeah.
uh, but I love it, and I think I did a good job of writing like a country rock banger that people like. And it's definitely the song where after the show people are like, "Oh shit, I've heard that song. I didn't know that was you." And I'm like, "Yeah, well, I guess you listen to the CBC."
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. That's
Um,
awesome.
Yeah, so I guess probably those three, and I would say Greenlight is probably at the top of my list right now. I'm still in that mode where I'm not sick of it from
Yes,
that.
exactly. Which is a lovely space to be in.
Yeah, totally,
Yes.
totally.
Okay, well, maybe we get to what you're sick of. So what do you
Right.
think is your worst song?
I am sort of sick of this song from the first Espinola record called Shoveling. Um, I think that okay, so Espinola, I guess, is like a country rock project. If you
That's
want to
how it
put a
sounds to me when I've been to
Yeah, if you
shows.
want
Yeah.
to put a thing on it. But also, I've played heavier music than that, and I've obviously played more dynamic music than that. And I am a music fan who likes a lot of different things. Um, I think there was a time when I thought that Espinola could capably veer back and forth between like the country rock thing and a heavier thing, and with no real country going on, like more of a like Soundgarden-y kind of thing.
Yeah.
And while I do love that music, I think that the project wants to be more focused than that. It kind of wants to be like the country rock thing. And this tune, Shoveling, is fun. And it's like kind of psyche and kind of jammy. It's like kind of stonery, I guess.
Uh-huh.
Um, but if I looked back on that record, I don't think I would include it. It's
Oh, that's
just,
a good metric of yeah. Oh.
yeah, it seems kind of out of place on that record. Then again, that record unfortunately got crafted over the course of like more than 5 years just because I kept getting discouraged about whether it was any good. And I was like, what is this? Like, am I putting this out? Am I trashing it? When actually, what I should have done was probably like after I did the first sessions, I should have done an EP and then done another EP. I think like it would have benefited me over the because I essentially have three releases with my own writing
Yes.
uh, my band Huron, and then these two Espinolas. Um, I think it would have benefited me more greatly if in my 20s and 30s I had put out more of my original music.
Hmm.
Because I do love doing that, and it's really a part of what I do, and I love playing pedal steel, and I love playing with other people.
Yeah.
But I definitely became like, oh, the pedal steel guy for a long time when
Right.
I would have earlier liked to have been acknowledged as pedal steel, and he's got this thing of his own and whatever. And I kind of like came to that a little bit late.
Huh.
But I'm not letting that, I still love doing it. I'm going to continue to do it. I'm writing another record now.
Right.
Um, but yeah, it probably would have benefited me to have just gotten over whatever insecurity I had about my own music years ago and just gone with the flow.
Yeah.
Uh, so, a song like Shoveling or like whatever could have easily ended up on an earlier version of that record and probably a worse version of that song. So maybe it worked out fine. There was a lot of Espinal material that like never came out because I had recorded a bunch of stuff over the years and then I put out like a couple like I'd make like 50 copies of a CDR or whatever. So it's out there somewhere, but like it's not really out.
Yes.
Um, Songs that were cool enough for me being 24
Yeah.
and being a big Neil Young fan and whatever.
Yeah.
Songs that I probably would never unearth now and put out, but I would have been cool if I put them out then.
I completely get what you mean. And huh. Well, I hope people listening to this heed that advice and
Yeah,
they do their own thing because it's fulfilling in a very unique way.
totally.
Yeah. Well, Thank you, man, for coming on.
My
We covered a
pleasure.
lot of stuff. This was a
We
great
totally did.
conversation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Some lovely and thoughtful questions. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
gave some thoughtful answers, so I
Yeah,
appreciate
thanks.
it a lot.
Yeah.
Um, we end it usually just with you reintroducing yourself, in this case, the bands and the worst song.
Okay. Like, do you want me to say my name?
Yeah, exactly. Say your
Yeah.
name, say the band name that produced the song, which is
Right.
Espanola. Yeah.
Okay. I'm Aaron Goldstein, and the worst song by my band Espanola is called Shoveling.
Perfect.
Why do you come unto us now in times of need? The only likely explanation is your cunning greed. I saw you on the front page. Now your life is changed, and pious heads are shaking now. So is your How dare you try to question what we're shoveling? The only likely confrontation ends when you